What's going on, everybody? This is Brian Mazik of the Fight Guys, and I'm also a Forbes contributor. And we want to talk MMA, and specifically, I want to talk to you about Jon Jones. And you saw the title of the video. I believe that it is time for Jon to move up to heavyweight. Um, and if it's not right now, it definitely needs to be sooner rather than later. And I'm going to start it off. I wrote this up for Forbes already, but I really wanted to share it with the YouTube channel and the YouTube community. Um, Let me just get this out of the way. Jon Jones is the greatest light heavyweight in MMA history. And in my opinion, second place isn't even close. However, now I think is the perfect time for him to make that jump to heavyweight where he has a better chance, I think, to remain unblemished and to make more money per fight. So Jon has narrowly escaped defeat in each of his last two title defenses. Some people may argue that he deserved to lose those fights. Back in July of 2019 at UFC 239, Jones won a split decision over Thiago Santos. That was the first time that anybody had ever beaten Jones on any judge's scorecard. One judge gave it to Santos. And if you look at websites called MMA Decisions, I look at it quite a bit now. 50% of the fans who scored the fight on that particular website had it for Santos. And they also aggregate the many of the MMA experts judge scorecards. And I'd say 5 or 6 of the people who are members of MMA media also scored it for Santos. Now, on Saturday at UFC 247, Dominic Reyes fell just short of the throne in Jones. He lost a unanimous decision, and it was a controversial one. Judge Joe Solis scored that fight 49-46 for Jon Jones. Nobody really understands how he got that, because that would basically suggest that Jon Jones won 4 rounds and that Reyes only won one. I don't think anybody who really watched that fight and knew what they were looking at saw that or thought that that was the right score. The other two judges scored it 48-47 for Jones, which made more sense. But I personally scored the fight 48-47 for Reyes. Matter of fact, 75% of the fans on MMA Decisions also saw it the same way. Now, if you want to read this article, I did put the link to it in the description so you can check it out. Now, likewise, on MMA Decisions, they showed that a larger number of the MMA media that they grabbed their scorecards, they actually scored the fight for Reyes as well. So what does all this mean? To put it plainly, Jones is fortunate to still be the UFC light heavyweight champion. Now, he's dominated competition for 11 years. Literally, for 11 years, he dominated with only a few serious challenges. So the question I think is that you have to ask is, why has the last 8 months brought on tougher fights and these controversial decisions? Well, I think that there are a lot of factors, and all of this kind of leads to what my point is that I think it's time for him to move to heavyweight. He's already had 28 professional fights, and some of them have been tough. Daniel Cormier, Alexander Gustafsson, and Vitor Belfort all pushed Jon Jones to another level, even before Santos and Reyes arguably defeated him. Also, we know Jon has had some personal issues, some run-ins with the law, some stuff with drugs. That kind of stuff, living hard, obviously can cause an erosion of skills. But I don't know if that's altogether what it is, right? And I'm not sure if it's just me, but Jones just doesn't look quite as fast these days. And I'm not trying to say he was ever Edson Barbosa when it comes to striking speed, but he just didn't get beat to the punch as much, or he didn't absorb the same amount of damage that he seems to absorb right now. Do you realize that Dominic Reyes is the first opponent to ever outland Jon Jones in a fight during his entire UFC career? Thiago Santos didn't do that, but it seems every fight we're getting closer to that. And now we saw Reyes actually outland him for the entire fight. So in conjunction with all of that I just mentioned, all of those aforementioned factors, the gap between Jones and the top contenders at 205 pounds could be closing because Jones is 32 years old, and it's just time for him to show some decline. Now, the last thing I'll point out as a potential factor of why we're seeing this gap close is something that I like to call the Rousey effect. Ronda Rousey was so dominant in women's MMA that she inspired like an entire generation of ladies to prepare for her. They trained specifically so that they could hopefully challenge and defeat her when and if they were ever given the chance. Matching up with her is like every single opponent's Super Bowl. Everybody gets up for Ronda. Meanwhile, it seemed difficult for Rousey to maintain her same level of intensity and motivation to continue to prepare, evolve, which is what she needed to do, but kind of struggled to do, and to turn away these next challengers. Everybody she faces, whether it's Sarah McMahon, Misha Tate, Amanda Nunes, Holly Holm, obviously, all of these women have been building up, trying to get to Ronda and trying to get this victory over her. When you mix all of that together, I think it was only a matter of time before someone at 135 pounds toppled Rousey, and ultimately it was Holly Holm, and then following after that, it was Amanda Nunes. Now, quite honestly, I think the clock is ticking on Jones's reign at 205 pounds. That's why, in my opinion, moving up to heavyweight makes so much sense for him. If his speed is declining a bit, chances are he'd still have quicker strikes than the opponents he'd face at heavyweight. He's 6'4", got an 84-inch reach. He already has the frame to carry 235 to 240 pounds with relative ease. He's never going to be the big hulking heavyweight, but a longer, leaner, but still thick and strongly built guy at heavyweight would probably fit him nicely. And don't underestimate his strength. Now, while his legs are thin, he's always looked sturdy against takedown attempts, and he's a strong wrestler in his own right. He has a 95% takedown defense rate in his UFC career, and he has 40 takedowns of his own. Now, obviously, those haven't come against heavyweights, but some of that came against Daniel Cormier, who we all know, even when he was a light heavyweight, wrestled like a heavyweight. At heavyweight also, I think that Jones would probably have little to no weight cut. And at this point in his career and in his life, that might actually be what the doctor ordered. We are seeing more and more fighters moving up in weight and having success by eliminating the burden of cutting weight. We got Anthony Rumble Johnson is one of the first that we saw really do that, is once he stopped trying to make middleweight and went on head up to light heavyweight. He's also teasing a heavyweight fight. And then most recently, we got Michael Chiesa, who stopped starving himself to get to lightweight. And now he's fighting and winning at welterweight. Just came off of a big victory over Rafael dos Anjos. This is something that's happening. At 32, Jones would still be a relatively young heavyweight, what I'd say anywhere from 6 to 8 years left for him to compete on a high level. To me, the benefits of moving up to heavyweight are there from a competition standpoint, but it's not all about winning fights. Like I said at the start of this is about making money. And there are likely more money fights. There's more money for him to make at heavyweight because of the matchups. Jones has already cleaned out the 205-pound division. Just think about it. He could fight the winner of Corey Anderson or Jan Blachowicz. Yes, he could do that. Their fight is scheduled for February 15th, this Saturday. But Jones would be carrying the weight as the only big name in that potential main event. He's the draw. And the secondary draw is, you talk about an A side, Corey Anderson or Jan Blachowicz are C- sides when you talk about notoriety and their drawing power. Okay. And based on the pay-per-view numbers, the Jones and the other less than marquee names that he's faced, when he has faced those kind of guys, they haven't generated big numbers. It's unlikely we see a buy rate that exceeds 650,000. If you look at some of these pay-per-view buy rates that are out there, Jones's two biggest pay-per-view results came against Daniel Cormier. When they met the first time at UFC 182, they did about 800,000 pay-per-view buys, which is nice. In the rematch at UFC 214, they did about 850,000. Now, Jones hit that 700,000 pay-per-view buy mark against Rashad Evans and against Alexander Gustafsson. But every other time that he has main evented a card, the numbers have been lower than that because those are the key big name guys that he's fought. There is nobody else right now on the light heavyweight landscape that he hasn't already beaten who has ever even main evented a pay-per-view card. And because of that, I think it's pretty easy to conclude that there are no more major draws left at 205 pounds for Jones. Yet, the competition is seemingly getting stiffer. You're fighting guys like Dominic Reyes and Thiago Santos, who can't even get you anywhere close to 600, 700 pay-per-view buys, but you're barely beating these guys because maybe this gap is closing. So you got to ask yourself, if you're Jon Jones, Does the risk match the reward if you stay at light heavyweight? Now, at heavyweight, I think it's a different story. Obviously, there's still a significant risk. But if you were to say Jon Jones versus any of the following names, I think you got an opportunity not to get 800,000 or 850,000 pay-per-view buys. I think you got a chance to get into McGregor Cerrone territory, and you could get 1 million pay-per-view buys. I'm thinking Stipe Miocic, Daniel Cormier, Francis Ngannou, Derek Lewis, or if you really want to throw a long shot out there, former champion and current WWE champion Brock Lesnar. Now, if you want to say that you think, oh, it's completely unfathomable that Jon Jones would fight Brock Lesnar, they're still generating odds that says that Lesnar's a potential or possible um, next opponent for Jon. You check Bet Online and you'll see it's long odds. It's like plus 2,200 with Corey Anderson is the more likely next opponent. But that concept is still out there. That fight was talked about and rumored a year or two ago. Now, in addition to the purses and the win bonuses that champions get, top stars and champions like Jones also earn pay-per-view points in the UFC. That means that they get a percentage of the pay-per-view revenue that is generated. Now, I had a conversation with former UFC flyweight champion Demetrius Johnson last year, and he explained the pay-per-view point system to me, how you get $1 for every pay-per-view buy, or you get $2 once it gets up to a certain tier and that sort of thing. Now, some of this has changed due to the ESPN Plus streaming deal, because when he gave me this information, we had this conversation, I think he was speaking more from the way it used to be with the older structure. But we do know that there is some concept of pay-per-view points that still exist. And there's some documents that were submitted in a lawsuit actually against the UFC that show that those the framework is still very similar. And so it's still a very major part of how fighters earn. If you look recently at the McGregor fight that I talked about before, he reportedly earned pay-per-view points for knocking out Donald Cerrone in 40 seconds, while Cerrone actually didn't get compensated, despite the fact that their main event, their pay-per-view, drew 1 million pay-per-view buys, became the largest streamed pay-per-view event in history. But Cerrone didn't get those pay-per-view points. Not quite the draw by himself that Jon Jones is, and certainly not the draw that Conor McGregor is. Now, if Jon Jones is fighting proven main event draws like Stipe Miocic, like Daniel Cormier, like Francis Ngannou, like Derek Lewis, and most certainly like against someone like Lesnar at heavyweight, Jon Jones is going to sell more pay-per-views than he would fighting anybody at light heavyweight. And then because of the pay-per-view point structure, he will in turn make more money per fight. That's just pretty simple to understand. I know that Jon Jones has this special attachment to the 205-pound division. That's his division. He wants to make it clear he's the best ever at that division. He also wants to make it clear he's the best ever, period, regardless of division. I think his point has been proven at 205 pounds. But it seems to me that right now, a move up to heavyweight is the best thing for him. I appreciate you watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video. God bless and peace.